Australians are passionate people. They're passionate about sport, they're passionate about their country, and they're passionate about their wine. When you live in Adelaide, you are about an hour's drive from some of the best red wine production in the world.
Welcome back to Drinking It In. I am your host, Chris Casara, and we have a special guest here and a special topic of Australian wine. Although I'm seeing my camera is kind of reversed. You got the same one. Okay, great. Kent Stoll here is my special guest. We've been colleagues for a long time, but I haven't seen you in the New York office, since we had gone our separate ways professionally. But we've gone back and forth on a few posts, and you suggested that, hey, we should do an Australian wine video, and I was like, great, it's a good idea. It's been on my list. Let me move it to the top of the list. And I reached out, and you were gracious enough to come on, so that's fantastic. Spent quite a bit of time in Australia, and when I asked you for some recommendations, you came back with a whole bunch of good stuff and serious stuff. So maybe just give folks a little bit of background on how you came to really be almost like I would say you could be a marketing agent for Australian wine.
It's good. First of all, it's good to see you, and thanks for inviting me. And I never really quite fancied myself in, or I suppose I did fancy myself, but more behind a camera than in front of one. But so how did we get here, right? And so I as a boy had this sort of passion for sport, particularly sport of cricket, right? And I grew up in a British colony, a cricket mad country. And I spent a lot of my late nights as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old boy sort of listening to cricket on the radio from Australia. I wasn't really popular with a lot of my friends. They're like, how do you not root for your home country? Why are you rooting for the enemy? I'm like, well, one, the enemy is good, and two, I can hear what they're doing. And, I can imagine it on by listening to it on the radio. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, I'm going to go there one day. And lo and behold, I don't know, sort of, 20, almost 30 years later, 20 plus years later, I ended up on what was meant to be I went for a work trip, probably about 20 years after, and then I ended up going back multiple times over the course of a few years. And I ended up in this job where I was based in New York, but my senior team sat in Hong Kong and Australia. And through, I guess, some combination of hard work and a stroke of good luck, one day I got asked, do you fancy a post here? And do you want to come for 2 years? And 2 years turned into 10.
Oh wow,
Right?
that's a lot. Okay, I didn't realize it was that long. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it became home, right? And so a lot of people, when I guess when a lot of us think about Australia, we think about Sydney and we think about Melbourne. I had a job in this sort of very, I guess, the fourth largest city in the country, Adelaide.
Okay.
And there are very few things in my life that I am passionate about as that little town. I landed on New Year's Day. About 4 days later, school started. My kids hit school, and I made a whole ton of friends. And by the second week, I'm in a pub, it seems, every Friday night, right? And so I confess I went out. I knew nothing about wine. I knew nothing about Australian wine. Had the benefit of some really good friends who, when you live in Adelaide, you are about an hour's drive from some of the best red wine production in the world. Australians are passionate people. They're passionate about sport, they're passionate about their country, and they're passionate about their wine. So I got swept up in that. Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, that's probably the best way to kind of get into something, like, is get completely immersed in it entirely. But that's a great story. Yeah. So there are a lot of so spending 10 years down there. So you weren't just there and drank a little bit of Australian wine, maybe visited one spot. You had plenty of time and to really get completely immersed. So that's fantastic. I mean, so I've never been to Australia. I don't know that I'll ever get there. That plane flight is a bit maybe above my maximum, but I'll never say never. But right now, I'd say it's pretty unlikely. But I definitely try to experience Australia through the wine in some way, or I try to do that with lots of countries, or really, dive deep into some of the research, and then just, drink a lot of different options to really get a feel for what's there.
Mhm.
And I think when, first when I got into wine, or when I was, I don't want to say get serious about it, but when I was starting to, dive into it in much more of a much more educated capacity, right?
Mm.
Like really trying to understand everything. It was during the early or the probably mid to late 90s, when Australia was, sort of the new thing, right? The big Australian red wines were sweeping the nation. And, I got into those to a certain extent. And I know that one of my first like big purchases was I had bought a bottle of E&E black pepper Shiraz
Yeah.
from some sort of wine bid site or whatever. I didn't really have any idea what I was getting into, but I laid that down in the cellar. I drank it like 5 years later. I really loved it. So I was, and I had already been hooked to a certain extent, but that really helped. And then Australia kind of went into a dark, I don't want to say a dark period, but at least the wines we were getting over here, they were they were importing everything. And
Right.
so is kind of like how Merlot was in the 90s, where it was very popular, and then it started getting produced quite a bit, and not, it wasn't always the best stuff. And then the movie Sideways came along, but that doesn't apply to Australia. Recently, I would say over the last like 5 7 years, I've come back to Australian wine across the board, right? Whether that is Riesling, Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon,
Mm.
uh, Chardonnay, right? Specific, at least from my experience, and it's just been, I've just been more and more impressed, right? So I was glad to bump up this episode so I can drink a little bit. And now on this one I have the 2021 vintage. I don't know what you happen to have in
I
front of you.
I have the exact same thing.
It is okay. So
Yeah.
that's good. So we're going to I'm going to actually use, rather than put a backward image up here, I'll put some separate B-roll of the label. But you know, this Shiraz is, I mean, D'Arenberg, the Footbolt, it's pretty easy to find. It's a very well-known producer. I mean, I've had this wine in other vintages a few times. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say I'm an expert on it, but I've had it a few times to know that, I know I'm going to like it if I drink
Yeah.
it. So this was one of the selections you had given me that was, sort of, you kind of gave me some price tiers, which was
Yeah.
very impressive to start. And this was one of the 15 to $25 ones.
Mhm.
But maybe give our viewers one or two more of your favorites that
Sure.
you have.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I started with Darrenberg because it's kind of near and dear for a couple of reasons, right? And Darrenberg's winery was about a 30-minute drive from my house.
Oh, okay. That's
They have
awesome.
got it's on a small hill in the Barossa Valley, and they've got a beautiful restaurant with a beautiful front lawn where adults can go and sit on the restaurant and watch
Mhm.
your children play.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
That's
So,
handy.
and as long as you've got a designated driver, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was kind of where the attraction came from, right? When I sort of like when we started to talk about this, and I went up the range a little bit, I thought about um, things that I've been able to experience through my own taste bud, but through the eyes and the brains of friends as well, right?
Hmm.
Um, a lot of those wines came to me through friendship groups who knew somebody who worked in a winery, owned a winery, some affiliation with that industry. And as I said, Adelaide's a pretty small town in a way.
Yeah.
whole metropolitan area is roughly 1 million people. You're generally 1 degree of separation from somebody in the wine business.
Okay.
And
And yeah,
so,
logically that makes sense.
yeah. So if I sort of go up the range a little bit, right, in sort of the 50 to say, let's say 60 to $100 range, right, which I know is a
Hmm.
big jump, right? Um, I'll stay with Darrenberg for a moment. They make something called a dead arm Shiraz, which is more
Okay.
of an older vine, some of their original vines. The winery is about 115 years old. And
Yes, the back of the bottle says since 1912.
so the guy who started the winery, actually, and the reason the Footbolt was the name of a horse that the original owner
Mhm.
owned. Um, But yes, if you go up, sort of the say $60 to $100 price range, there is a dead arm Shiraz.
Okay.
It is a little bit, and I'm terrible at describing things. I'm going to use very basic terms. It's it's chocolatey. Is probably the
Hmm.
best thing. There's like a smooth chocolatey flavor to it. So I kind of liked it because somebody said it's really, really good. And then I drank it like, actually, it really, really is good.
And I try to keep it very simple and straightforward in everyday language, like
Yeah.
because I think one of the big things about the wine world is it's just so over engineered,
Mm,
and I think people feel intimidated when they're drinking or selecting a wine or stuff, and it's just completely unnecessary. But
agree.
I think the idea that a wine has like a chocolatey end to the experience is that sounds like a lot. That sounds like it does sound really delicious.
Mm,
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out in the show notes. I'm going to list out all the suggestions you made with some of the with the wine searcher links, just so
yeah.
folks can see if they're available local to them. But that's yeah. So there are some really good options. I'm swirling this guy, and it kind of I opened up the bottle. You heard the crack, and it just kind of it already filled up
Mm,
the room down here. Um, and that's sort of the beauty of these Shiraz or Syrah, right? If you're
mm,
drinking the same grape from the rest of the world, they're they can fill a room up with the aromas as well as be delicious. But
mm.
and I don't think, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it was, that whole big trend of everything getting imported from Australia, and then, people maybe never came back to it. But like, I don't see a lot of people drinking Shiraz or Syrah in general, and I
Mhm.
think that's really sort of, I think it's a shame.
Yeah,
It's one of my
it's an
favorite grapes.
interesting
Yeah.
one. Yeah, I think if you go back maybe about, I don't know, maybe about 25 years, you might recall a period where Australian wines were coming into the US, and I think Yellowtail is the one that
Yeah,
stuck with
that was the
me,
one that
right? So
kick-started everything.
yeah, and it was sort of I remember sort of this big advertising campaign about it. And then so, I end up in Australia and I hear people saying, don't drink that stuff. It can't be good for you. It's kind of like Foster's. We don't drink it here. We send it away.
We send it
Right.
away.
So
That's
I'm
funny.
digging and digging, like, what's wrong? What is it? And they're like, well, so it's not our best. Right. So over time, I think the advertising approach changed to come to Australia and try these big, bold red
Mhm.
wines almost to the detriment of what's a fairly good population of white wines,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But big and bold and red kind of became the mantra for a while, right? So, you know, and I find this stuff readily available here, right? The Dead Arm Shiraz, I actually found it in a fairly big wine, I guess they call it a superstore, about a half an hour's drive from my house. I live on the North Shore of Long Island,
Mhm, mhm.
and yeah, so it's one of those. So the Dead Arm, you buy it, you store it for a bit, and it's a special occasion type wine, yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I would,
yeah.
it sounds like it would be a good special occasion
Mhm.
red to
And
serve.
And then when you go further up the chain, I think you
Hmm.
talked about things like I can't recall the specific one, but Henschke is a very well-known winemaker
Hmm.
in Australia that do a couple of a couple of good regs all the way from something that's in the $100 range to the top of the line, like a Hill of Grace, which is about a $400 bottle of wine, right? It's not your
Gotcha. Yeah.
everyday or even your every special occasion, right? Um, but I think people will also, who have familiarity with Australian wines will probably recognize the brand Penfolds,
Yes. Yes.
which
Certainly.
is arguably the largest Australian winemaker and probably the most commercially viable. They do a couple of things. They've got like a Penfolds 407, which is a Cab Sav, which is probably in the hundred-ish plus dollar range.
Hmm.
A lot of good marketing done for that wine over the last 2 to 3 years when it's a relatively new vintage, right, or a new brand, and so they did a lot of marketing. Penfolds has been around for a very, very long
Yeah,
time.
that was sort of the
Yeah.
entry point into the Australian wine scene because that way you see Penfolds everywhere, and they have they always have had a great reputation. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it makes a lot. I mean, I've never had the Penfold Grange, but that's um, yeah, you have experience with that.
There is a tradition with, I guess, not just people who like or appreciate wine, but some people do it because it seems like a nice thing to do. But you invest in the vintage of your children's birth,
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
and you drink that wine with them on their 18th birthday when they come of age. Right. And so my three girls are all of age. They're not really wine drinkers, but they appreciated the
Hmm.
sentiment. So the first one, my eldest daughter, yep, she was in. Right? She was ready to drink it with me. My middle daughter, with a very good friend of mine who is a born and raised Aussie and lived here in New York for a little while, and she sat with us as we drank it because it wasn't her thing. And
Okay.
my youngest just said, "Go for it." So we did.
Oh, that's great. So you had bought each the birth year for each of them of that. That's
I did.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have children, but I mean the idea of that is that I love that idea.
Mm.
The Henschke one that you mentioned was I think it was Marble Angel
Marble Angel. Yeah.
Cabernet Sauvignon, and I saw that was accessible in a few spots in the U.S. So I'm definitely going to try to
Yeah.
track that one down. I'm going to give this one a taste.
You're
And
you're you're clearly a lot more professional than I am. I've
well,
I've kind of just dropped it in.
no, that's good. Well, yeah, I didn't want to go too crazy with my initial pour, right? And I'm showing off this new glass because I just got a couple of these glasses. They're actually a Syrah glass
Mhm.
from Riedel. Now I do think the glass matters to a certain extent, but I don't really buy into like every single glass needs its own like shape, right? Every
Mm.
single varietal needs its own shape. But this one just seemed it's a nice big bowl, and it seems like it would be great for anything, but mostly
Mhm.
reds. And you know what I like about this wine is it's not I don't sense that it's going to be sweet. Like some wines you can almost get a sense that there's going to be some sugar to it. Now it's possible it shows up after we taste it, but it just smells like I'm going to say clean and pure, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
And it's just like there's just whatever dark fruit you could come up with is in here. I'm getting some blackberries, some
Blackberries.
you could
Yeah.
argue black cherries.
Yeah.
um I'm getting and maybe a little bit of like just a little bit of a baking spice, which is always a nice touch. I don't get too, and it doesn't come across as very like oaky, like vanilla,
Mm.
that type of a note. Now, and I believe that this is. I probably should have looked at whether it's spent some time in oak, but I believe it does.
It does indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that probably a majority of Barossa Reds are oak
Yeah.
cured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and sometimes, and I think again for a period of time that they went a little bit too much over the top, and now I think most of the winemakers have kind of brought that back, a
mm,
little bit restrained, if you will,
mhm.
and I think it just serves the whole marketplace so much better because the wines are really much more or they have the ability to be more crowd pleasers, right?
Yeah,
So, as if
yeah.
there are some people who really like those oaky wines. Now, if you see it more on the whites in the Chardonnay world, but like if you really like the oaky wines or you don't. I'm kind of in the middle where I like the vanilla, the butter popcorn, those types of notes, but I don't want it to overwhelm like
Right,
that
right.
the
Yeah.
fruit. And I feel like this is not overwhelming, the fruit. It smells
No,
it's really good.
I, I think the word I sort of think about, I find it accessible, right?
Hmm.
It is on so many levels, right? It's easily available. It's a good middle of the road, and it's a have it every couple of days
Yeah.
kind of wine. We will quite often will open a bottle, and so the two of us, we might, just have a couple of glasses and come back to it in a day or two. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I
Um,
think I think I like that you do that because I think more people should do that and just um, you know, come back to a wine later that night. Come back to the wine the next day, even at day three, because it does change, especially if it's a nice wine. And it's wild in some cases where what you drank on day one is just completely different than what
mm,
showed up on day two. I get some of that vanilla, um, note on the palate,
on the
which is
yeah.
cool. So I like how I love when a wine just like shows up as one thing on the nose and then turns into, or maybe adds a little bit to the experience on the palate. So
Mm.
this is lovely. Very.
Yeah, but it seems to do different things to different part of the
Hmm.
tunnel. You know, and there's almost I find it's almost like you could feel there's a chalkiness that comes down the
Yeah,
sides.
a little bit.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
and
I'm getting some yeah, there's definitely some herbal notes in here, but it's very subtle. And that
mm,
vanilla really lingers, which is really nice.
yeah,
Really
yeah.
nice. Cool.
It,
Well,
it,
there's definitely a winner. I'm gonna make sure to share out the all of the other selections that you made because there were some really good things in there to explore. And some I've never, the majority I've never experienced, although I'm
mm.
familiar with some of the producers. So I think it's a worthy quest to knock things off of the Kent wine list.
I don't know if there's one that I believe I shared that I confess that it's it is impossible to get in the US, and
I'm
although I've
sure.
tried, I am not quite sure
Yeah.
why, which is the Rockford's Basket Press Shiraz.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Um, it is again, I don't
Hmm.
consider myself anything other than a I like what I like wine drinker.
Hmm.
It is hands down the best drop of wine I've ever had.
Okay. That's high praise. That's good
It
to know.
is absolutely delicious. And it's, they've got so Rockford are a relatively small, most I guess we'd call them a boutique producer. They have never gotten too big for their britches in terms
Hmm.
of volume of production, but they've attracted a following such that by purposely limiting the size of their vineyards, the amount of grapes they harvest, the amount of wine, the grapes that are eligible to become part of their wine making, right? You can wait 5 years to get a bottle,
Okay.
right? Or
Okay.
to get on a
Yeah.
list
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be
Yes.
eligible to get a bottle,
Very
right?
highly allocated.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
my dear friends back in Australia, ever so often when they produce their each year's vintage of this particular wine, they open their cellar doors around October, So, and you know, if you live in the area and you drive up and you're part of the membership group, you can buy a case. If you're not a member and you turn up and they happen to have extra, you buy one. So inevitably, I get some text or something on social media with someone, basically, I'm not going to show you, you know, rude signs, but holding up a bottle and
Yeah.
reminding me that I'm not there to get mine.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if so I was spoiled for a little bit back in probably like I don't know, call it 2011 to 14 maybe. I might actually be way off, but I spent a good part of 3 year period going back and forth to the UK to onboard, our friends in the UK, and
Yeah, yeah.
that was where I started to drink Australian wine more because there was a lot of Australia and South African wine that got into the UK that you couldn't get here,
Mm,
much more prevalent. So you had a lot of choice, and I found that I was sort of making those types of selections, or I'm like, oh, okay, I'll give this wine a try, and I'm like, okay, I need to pay attention more here, and
mm,
yeah, so I think that was definitely something else that I think opened my eyes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think historically it's also been quite an expensive venture to import Australian wines. Always has been, right? You know, sometimes for, you know, commercial reasons, you know, and I think tariffs have been, and this is before our current tariff
No,
regime, right?
before tariff
Long,
fest.
long ago. Yeah. It's, you know, tariffs have been a hurdle.
Yeah.
So as I said, if I use the almost anything from Rockford's winery, you know, maybe about once a year, I get online and I thought maybe today's the day.
Yeah.
Um, Not available.
No.
I can
Yeah.
buy one in Singapore and probably I think it's probably a current vintage, which is probably would be like 2023, would probably retail for about 150 Australian dollars.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I can buy that in Singapore and probably for another 150 they'll ship it to me.
Yeah, right. Becomes an expensive proposition.
Yeah. But no, I think if you go around, you know, if you know, we both have proximity to big cities where we are,
Hmm.
right? And but you don't necessarily need to be in a big city. I live out in a suburb, and you know, a couple of
Yeah.
wine shops within a 5 minute drive will have a reasonably decent selection. So it's actually helped me expand my own taste buds, right? You know,
Yeah.
and you've got a lot of wineries that are small to medium size that are, you know, finding a way in finally into the US. So,
Okay. Okay.
but we talked a lot about, I think almost everything I sent you in terms of recommendations seems very much biased towards the red variety.
That's okay. We'll
Yeah,
we'll we'll have you back on for what maybe we'll do a white focused episode, a white
yeah,
white
yeah,
wine focused episode on from Australia. That might be a good follow up down the line.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And since I found out that you live within 15 minutes of where I grew up, if you do find something, you'll have to let me know exactly where, so then I can either send my parents to grab one, or I'll hit the store when the next time I visit them.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah, and
funny.
also let us know when you're coming down back to see the folks as well. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
I think it's we're probably what 5-10 minutes away at most.
yeah. It's very close,
Yeah,
depending on
small
exactly
world,
where
huh?
you're at. But yeah, very small world. So, but thank you so much for joining. This was fun. You have a shocking um, breadth of knowledge on Australian wine, and I think we definitely want to do a white episode. We'll have to coordinate getting a similar wine, whether it's the same wine exactly, or maybe just maybe we taste two different Chardonnays or two different
Yeah,
Rieslings
yeah.
or something like that. That could be fun. Thank you so much for joining, and cheers to you, Kent. And I
Cheers,
appreciate
Chris.
you
I
coming
appreciate
on.
you having me. This is good fun.